Well, our time is 7:30. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Although we may be few in the room, prayerfully others will join. Let me first welcome you to tonight's town hall discussion, brought to you by S.O.A.R Development Corporation. In conjunction with, we also work with the Community Connection. Make sure I'm saying that right. Even though I have my glasses on, I'm sorry. Yes, so we're in conjunction with the Mansfield UMADOT Community Connection. So I welcome you again to this month's discussion topic, which is the 5 types of dysfunctional families. And I'm actually going to even add 2 bonus definitions. So let's just jump right in. This is an informational town hall discussion. However, I would love participants. If you have questions, feel free to raise your hand or just unmute, and we'll go from there. But let's jump in. So to start out, I'm going to give you the 5 types of dysfunctional families, and then I'm going to go into more definition. So there is the substance abuse family. There is the conflict-driven family, the violent family, and then last but not least, the authoritarian family. Then I'm going to present 2 other types of dysfunctional families, and that is the poor communication family and the exploitative family. So with that being said, let's jump in with the emotionally unavailable family, or the emotionally detached family. Just giving some context that this type of family system is, generally speaking, you will find this family that has little to no signs of affection or warmth that's missing in the family. They are emotionally unavailable. They may lack hugs, hand holding, or any other physical signs of love, which would teach children in the family how to be emotionally available. Families who are emotionally unavailable or emotionally detached will also may find the parents working long hours. That's just to make ends meet. Sometimes that happens, especially in today's society. Other times the parents, they are overseers of work and traveling, and it compels them to not be available at home. Now we have people working from home, and that's another component where you can get kind of caught up, being able to do these kinds of things on Zoom and working too late in the hours or late in the evening. Therefore, you're not emotionally available to your family, being able to have meals together, being able to spend quality time with one another outside of meals, checking in with how your children's day is gone, or even with your spouse. So an emotionally unavailable family, or an emotionally detached family, you will find little to no affection. You will find little to no time spent together, little expression of physical touch, such as hand holding, even hugs. The next type of addictive or family, dysfunctional family, is an addict family or the addictive family. That's the one that many of us have talked about. We've talked about this in previous town hall discussions. And the substance abuse family, just to give you some context, there are about 8 million children under the age of 18 who live with a parent who has a substance abuse problem or disorder. This also includes parents who abuse not only alcohol, but other kinds of drugs, which includes prescription drugs. In this family system, you will find that the family is often chaotic. They have a chaotic lifestyle. They're always rushing. Oftentimes, there's forgetfulness involved, forgetting to pack a lunch, forgetting to pick children up. So, in the addictive family, there might be one or both of the parents who are addicts or have a substance abuse problem, and they're absolutely absent from their kids' lives, and sometimes they're financially unstable. In the addict family or the substance abuse family, you will also find that there's neglect of the children. There's a high rate of truancy for the children, that the children don't get their basic needs met. And of course, these children grow up to be adults. So this neglect leads to improper living conditions, improper health and diet, improper education, as well as medical neglect. So the substance abuse addict family. A third type of dysfunctional family is the violent family, or you may know them as, you might hear, abusive family. And in the in the violent family, there are, just giving you some stats here, there are approximately 4.5 to 15 million children who are exposed to some form of physical violence in the home. What this means is, growing up in a volatile or violent family, this is unfortunate, a horrific experience for children. They experience not only family violence in the form of physical violence, but also there's verbal, sexual, and psychological abuse, and any other behavior that creates an unsafe environment. So the violent family or the abusive family is not just physical violence. It can be again, as I said, verbal, sexual, and psychological abuse, or any behavior that creates an unsafe environment for the children. Now, keep in mind, these children then become adults. And hopefully with time, I'll be able to share with you what that will look like in adults. That is dysfunctional family type 3, abusive family, violent family. The other type of dysfunctional family type number 4, and that is, let's see, which one do I want to present to you right now? Let's talk about the high conflict family, or we would call this the conflict-driven family. In this type of family system, you will see heated arguments all the time. There's hurtful disputes, there's long-running feuds, what family members are constantly picking fights. There's pressure from one family member who will pick at another family and intentionally pushing buttons. Often the family members in the conflict-driven family, they feel threatened more often than not. They may retaliate against one another with hateful actions. It really doesn't matter what kind of conflict that happens. They can argue over money, they can argue about personal style, even arguing over what television show to watch. What happens in this type of family system, it creates an inability to communicate and resolve issues in a peaceful way that does not cause long-lasting damage. What happens is it does create long-lasting damage. So the children in high conflict families are oftentimes fearful in their approach to situations, because they're instilled in them to be afraid of the conflict that may occur if anything happens. Thus, you'll see that also in adults. Fear of conflict, fearful to bring up things that might bother you. So anyway, that is high conflict family. I do want to say that the intensity of the fights keeps increasing with every hurtful word spoken. Pastor Wanda, you had a question. Yes, ma'am. Can you unmute yourself?
That would be helpful, wouldn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask you,
Yes, ma'am.
on a personal note, I have a loved one that deals with substance abuse, and you are really on point with some of the issues that we see. Mainly, I have two things to ask you about. The children, when they grow up, they're small children that grow up in a abusive drug home. The children become adults at 5 years old, 8 years old. The children become the adults. And then the parents blames everyone for their situation.
Yes.
What is that?
Yeah, that's actually called early parentification. So the children become parentified way before they should. And what ends up happening there, children, they develop poor problem-solving skills because they have limited access to different ways to handle situations. So that child ends up growing up either having poor impulse control or aren't able to make decisions. So they're very indecisive. But yeah, that's what it's called, early parentification. That's a good
So
question.
how do you help that child? Because they're not a child.
Yeah.
How do you help them try to stay a child, but they have been pushed into adulthood?
Yeah, one of the ways that you could help a child is to create an environment where they can be a child. It's a difficult habit to break because once after the age of 5, pretty much how they are developed is solidified. But after the age of 5, you just kind of are being shaped beyond that. So what ends up happening is you have to give them the space to be children and give them limited adult responsibilities, even though they may try to take it on. So
Right.
a child may instantly and automatically look at a younger sibling to protect them. And when the environment is set where they can feel comfortable and safe, they'll relax that behavior and know that someone else, an adult, is going to watch their younger sibling. So you usually see that a lot more in the eldest or oldest
Yeah.
sibling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good question. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Are there any other questions before I move on? Okay, so our last thing that we just talked about was the high conflict family or the conflict driven family. Now I want to talk to you about, how many did I do? I did substance abuse, conflict driven, the violent family. Let's talk about the authoritarian family. You may see this a lot, or may not, but this might sound a little familiar. You might know some people who are in an authoritative or authoritarian family. These are family members with parents who act like dictators. They make great demands, but give little positive feedback. Mistakes are often met with severe punishment, which could lead to yelling, spanking, and other forms of corporal punishment. In these households, the authoritarian sets the rules, and it is my way or the highway concept. happens is children learn to follow rules, but don't gain valuable experience in making their own decisions and learning from their own mistakes. Again, these family members, again, authoritarian family systems, they set really strict rules. They have to be followed by the children without question. And the parents order the children to stick to the family's rigid belief systems. And this also includes religious, political, or even financial belief systems, and does not leave room for personal choices. So that is an authoritarian family. So just to review the 5 that I gave, and then I'm going to give you 2 bonus. There's the substance abuse, the conflict-driven family, the violent family or volatile family. There is the authoritarian family, and then the emotionally detached family. I'm going to give you a 6th one. In this family system, we're going to call it the poor communication family. The members of this dysfunctional family do not know how to communicate. They may interact only when necessary and continue with their task without crossing paths with each other. So this family, you may see them talk, but not really talk with substance. It's more task driven. Did you do this? Did this get done? And that's it. What happens is a family with weak communication skills does not discuss issues, but believes that their problems are solved, whatever those problems are. There's no healthy exchange of words or views. Either there's silence or shouting or screaming. Does not have any empathy. So there's either silence or shouting or screaming. That is a poor communication style family. And then the 6th one is an exploitative family. This family type mostly tends to exploit their children or partners. It might be for money, possession, or personal work. Exploitative family members believe that children live with them to do their work and bidding. So this might be, you might see this in the form of parents who have the children do everything. Go do this, go do that, take the garbage out, do the dishes, while the parents have little or no involvement. So the kids' needs are non-existent. So the kids need to play, they need to have fun, they need to relax, but it's non-existent in an exploitative family. So just to review one final time, and then I'm going to go and briefly share some of the reasons for some of the dysfunctional families. There was emotional unavailable families, the addict family, the abusive family, poor communication family, high conflict family, aka conflict-driven family, exploitative family, and lastly, the authoritarian family. Those are the types of dysfunctional families that you will see. So let's ask the question, what are the reasons for dysfunctionality, I should say, in a family? What are the reasons? Well, one is family history of dysfunction. We know it in the faith world as generational curses, generational pass down, generational behaviors. So dysfunction does not just begin at the here and now. Dysfunction happens way in the past. So parenting styles or behaviors learned not only through observation, but through reflecting from their parents and or caregivers. Therefore, dysfunctional parents may easily reflect the same behavior or go overboard in their way of parenting. Since they do not know what healthy parenting looks like, they just pass this on to the next generation, and their children grow up to pass that same dysfunctional behavior with their children and their family. The cycle just continues. Another reason why families develop dysfunction is through health issues, such as mental health issues, chronic illness, cancer, even accidents that may result in, on an extreme case, someone losing a limb or anything that changes the functionality of a family member could create a dysfunctional family system. So what that may mean is someone in the family may feel useless, or they, whether were previously very valuable and felt vibrant in a family. Sometimes the family member has low self-esteem, so there's some mental health issues there. There's this situation where there's depression and anxiety, or personality disorders can create dysfunctional families. Changes in mood or medication can create dysfunction in families. For example, on that, a person with a psychological issue or psychological illness, they might develop conflicts in the family without proper treatment. So we have that uncle so-and-so or aunt so-and-so who is always causing problems. You know, they're always arguing with someone. They can't seem to get along with the family. That can create dysfunction in the family. People with mental health issues can be emotionally unavailable and unpredictable, which doesn't create a secure attachment in children. So if there is a lot of chaos, there's not peace, there isn't continuity and consistency, children don't learn how to have healthy attachments, and they grow up to be adults who don't know how to have healthy attachments. Another reason for dysfunctional family, we talked about that already, is addictions. And we're familiar with how addiction can impact families. Denial, being in place in addictions, when we deny how the addict is affecting the family as a whole and as individuals, it can cause the children to doubt their own emotions because they know that something's going on, but it is, denied. There's nothing wrong with that. And then what happens, they end up growing up as an adult and not being fully confident in their own sense of autonomy, their own, I'm going to call it their gut, their instinct, because they have been taught not to believe their experience. Another reason for dysfunctional families is the need for perfectionism, or there is constant criticism. So the perfectionist type parent who is conditioned to keep everything in a specific order, in a specific way, they might prove unhealthy for family members in the long run. It's great to have order, but when it's overly orderly, where there's not room for change or other people to bring their ideas into how the family can run, people in the family, particularly children, do not develop the skills, again, to think outside of their box. They stay very rigid. There's also criticism involved in the perfectionist type family or the perfectionist type parenting or constant criticism, as I said. There's also a lot of swearing, scolding, sarcasm, insults, jabs, and even abuse. That contributes to dysfunction. I spoke to you already about the authoritative parent style that imposes rules, expects results, doesn't entertain any slip ups, can't do anything wrong. And that's a high predictor for children who will grow up being anxious, and then they're anxious adults. Lack of empathy. Lack of empathy also contributes to dysfunctional family systems. When there's a lack of empathy, there comes a lack of understanding of emotions. So if you think as a child, sorry, when a person's emotions, feelings, and thoughts are not acknowledged, they don't develop the basic knowledge of how to recognize and empathize with others. The children feel socially isolated. They're hampered, meaning they can't communicate strongly, and they tend to have kind of are aloof, or they're kind of cold, or they are kind of void of kindness. So children who are in a home where there's lack of empathy grow up to be adults with a lack of empathy. Ineffective communication is also a way that feeds dysfunctional family systems, and I spoke about that already. The unwillingness to listen, the need to always respond. That's something you will see happen. People in dysfunctional families do not reflect whether their response is useful. They don't think about whether it's hurtful or if it's completely irrelevant. So ineffective communication. They're also adults will grow up, the children will grow up to be adults who always have to have the last word. So you'll find that in some adults. Dysfunctional families also can come out of a lack of privacy or independence. This comes when there's not the fostering of, it's okay to have privacy and it's okay to be independent. It fosters a lack of trust because it tells the child that you don't trust me to do things independently, which is very fear-based. And of course, we know what God says about fear. Hint on that. So it develops that in a child, and a child grows up to be a fearful adult. So that's a form of attachment. So an adult could develop fearful attachment. What that would look like is, I'm going to hang on to this relationship out of fear and not out of love. I'm afraid you might leave. So I'm overly concerned about what you're doing. I'm overly concerned about where you are. So the ripple effect from a child to an adult covers a lifespan. Finances are actually something that can lead to dysfunctional family systems. When there is a deficit in financial resources, the stress can greatly affect the family members, either directly or indirectly. Parents usually try to protect their children during such a crisis in a healthy family. However, in a dysfunctional family, the parents start neglecting the children's needs to save money while spending it on themselves, alcohol, or other indulgence. I want to pause for a second. I know I was talking a lot. Are there any questions, thoughts, comments? Awesome. I now want to talk to you just a little bit about a healthy family. A healthy family is one where the family members are attuned to each other's moods, the needs, the wants, the emotions, and the health of individuals in the family, which is totally opposite of what a dysfunctional family is. The most prominent emotions felt by one or more family members in a dysfunctional family are anxiety, secrecy, denial, and addiction. Do want to say that no parent is perfect, but there are some bad parents. And it's to know how to use this information outside of this 30, 45-minute conversation or discussion is to make yourself aware of what to look for, what you may see that may be earmarks or indicators of someone who may have come from a dysfunctional home. Now, what I'm about to read to you is not to say this is a catch-all, and to say if someone is experiencing that, oh, they must have come from a dysfunctional family. No. The family system, your family of origin, is the most influential part of our development. But there are other outliers that we have to consider when looking at a person holistically. So what I present to you now are just a few little, just about 10 things to consider when that is signs that someone grew up in a dysfunctional home. 1, the person may be a people pleaser, always doing for others, not caring for themselves. The person may become a perfectionist, again, due to the fear of failure or fear of punishment. A person may consistently feel guilty or obliged and answerable to people. So someone who's constantly feeling guilty for what they do, what they say, how they are, that could be an indicator of someone who has come from a dysfunctional family. A lack of proper communication skills. A lack of proper communication skills. The adult may also have a feeling of responsibility for others, an unrealistic, I might add, feeling of responsibility for others. Person may experience anxiety, hopelessness, or anguish, troubles them the most of the time. So person from a dysfunctional family will kind of always be anguishing about something, worrying about something frequently. Someone from a dysfunctional family may prefer seclusion or isolation, even if they're married. So they may be in a marriage, but they prefer to be alone. Someone from a dysfunctional family may have trust issues. They find it very difficult to trust other people. They're always dissatisfied due to a lack of appreciation for their own efforts. So they find it difficult to appreciate others' efforts. When there are siblings in the family, brothers and sisters, there's often sibling rivalries. There are individuals who are faced with favoritism by a parent based on their gender, color, area of interest. Parents or guardians have different private and public personas. Ooh, let me say that one again. When there's a difference between a parent or guardian's private and public personas. So I'm one way behind closed doors, but then I get out in public and I'm totally different. There's a lack of healthy boundaries and privacy. There's a deprivation of self, either depriving oneself of food as a punishment and or overeating. Parents, again, abusing drugs, alcohol, or other substances. Parents that are threatening to abandon children grow up to be the same way as, or children who experience that grow up to be adults who threaten abandonment in the same way. So something happens, they're out. Another sign of someone coming from a dysfunctional family is that you were punished for talking or replying or voicing your thoughts or even pursuing a hobby. That is another sign that you may have grew up in a dysfunctional family. And then lastly, if you were not allowed to experience childhood and treated like an adult. That's another sign of being in a dysfunctional family. So that, my friends, pretty much everything. I do want to share. I'm going to pause again and see if there are any questions. Awesome sauce. I do want to share with you some developmental information, if you will, when it comes to trauma in the violent family. Children who are exposed to trauma, it causes them to physically, whether they are exposed to it or experienced it themselves, it physically changes the development of the brain. Oftentimes, it's associated with an increase of psychiatric disorders and substance abuse. Now, notice I say children because these children grow up to be adults. So if your brain development is altered as a child, some of the areas that, as a result of trauma, some of the areas that are affected are there's a decrease in the prefrontal cortex. This is the area where we have judgment, poor impulse control, lack of ability to plan and or follow through. You may see this sometimes in children who unfortunately get labeled ADHD, and we don't take the time to talk about trauma experience. So fast forward to an adult who's had trauma and their prefrontal cortex is underdeveloped or did not develop or change in some kind of way. They may lack judgment, poor judgment, and not able to distinguish a healthy relationship versus a healthy relationship. They do things impulsively, impulse buying. That's one thing. Another way that trauma affects the brain, it affects the smaller hippocampus. And that's in the area of the brain where we have learning and memory. So we may find children who we can give them a direction. And so for some teachers, they may see this and they'll tell little Johnny, little Bobby, little Carrot, Kathy, whoever, to do A, B, C, and D, and they can't remember D or C. They might be able to recall A and B, but C and D, not so much. What happens as an adult is difficult to remember things or learn things. Now, as we age, we already have a decrease in our memory ability and our learning skills. But imagine someone that's dealt with trauma that grew up in a volatile family. As you grow older, you've already underdeveloped, but as you grow older, you're already starting at a deficit, and you'll see that decline a lot more. Another area, there is a reduced volume in the cerebellum. That's the area involved in coordinating physical movement and thoughts. So some children you may see who are very clumsy, and no one thinks about this, but you have to ask the trauma question. What's the family environment like? They grow up to be adults who are pretty clumsy, and they just are kind of awkward, and they don't have fluid thoughts. Lastly, a child that is raised in a violent family or a volatile family, their brain develops excessive activity in the amygdala. And we're familiar with that. The amygdala, of course, is where we have the fight, freeze area. So the brain's fear center is developed inappropriately or not developed at all, or or maladapted development. So what ends up happening, an adult will grow up being fearful at all times. So I share all that to say to you that dysfunctional family systems, again, have the ripple effect for generations. And it's important to know what they are, what they look like. And if it's someone that you know, or if it's friends that you have a close relationship with, you could help them identify some of the warning signs and then make changes, get therapy, talk to someone they feel comfortable with, and thereby changing the trajectory of their behaviors. Change is always possible. There is hope. It is not a hopeless situation. It's just a matter of talking through one's experience in your family of origin and then how that affects you as an adult. And that is my presentation for this evening, talking about the dysfunctional families, the 5 top, and then I added 2 more, giving you 7 types of dysfunctional families. Are there any thoughts? Oh my goodness, I appreciate your attentiveness. I appreciate you being here. And this was a moment for me to come on in S.O.A.R Development to present information in this town hall discussion. We can't answer it all here, but providing you information so that you can be well equipped to work within your communities, work within your homes, work within your work environments, in your churches, and with whomever you interact with. And I do appreciate you all. Do we have, again, I want to just open up and see if there are any other questions or thoughts.
Dr. Kim,
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say I thoroughly enjoyed the information. It was very informative. Something that I believe we all need, as you just stated, whether it's with our families or the ministry, people we know. It's so good to be able to break that down so we can understand a little better. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so very much. Prayerfully, it helps you to be able to interact with each other differently, extend compassion and understanding, grace, and empathy, that we've all go through something, and who you see before you is a combination of all of life experiences. So whoever you encounter, they are a totality of the past and the current. And being able to have the compassion to understand one another is one of our goals. So thank you guys so very much for joining me this evening. And I appreciate you, and I'll